Hey, patrons, welcome to our latest Top 50 Prospects Countdown. This is Zach, joined by Bob and Nick, and we're going to cover our top 50 prospects for the month of June. Hopefully, you're making it over from our live show that we just finished recording and are settled in for this latest Top 50 Countdown. Before we get started, a couple of things to note. Grayson Rodriguez did graduate since our most recent list at the beginning of May, so we will have a new number one this time around. And although this only affected my personal list, Yenier Cano has graduated as well, which allowed me to add a couple of new prospects to my list. We're going to get into, though, the overall top 50, and I will start off with the top 10. At number one, it shouldn't come as any surprise, Jackson Holliday. The shortstop whose 44-game on-base streak was recently snapped. He has been tearing up high A pitching at the young age of 19. He is followed by Joey Ortiz at second, Colton Cowser third, Kobe Mayo fourth, Jordan Westberg fifth, Heston Kjerstad sixth, DL Hall seventh, Dylan Beavers eighth, Connor Norby ninth, and Cade Povich, who is brand new to our top 10, moving up 2 places from last month. So I'll start with Jackson Holliday. Great prospect or the greatest prospect?
I feel like we've said that about quite a few guys over the past few years, and all deservedly so. So I'll say greatest. You know, Gunnar was better than Adley. Jackson's better than Gunnar. They just get better and better. No, he's fantastic. There's not enough superlatives that you can lay on him at this point in time in his young career. He didn't have the best week this week. I think he lowered his OPS from like 1250 to 11 something. So he's slipping a little bit, but still hanging in there. He does it all. He's got speed, defense, a great arm, good instincts. He's got power. He hit greatest hit tool on the planet, apparently. Great plate discipline. Really, and it seems like he's got good, characteristics is off the field too. Just seems like a good guy who's just humble for the most part and good teammate. I mean, that's a little bit harder for us to know, but it just seems that way based on things I've heard. And yeah, seems like the full package, soon to be the third consecutive year that the Orioles have number one overall prospect in baseball. I know Ben Badler thinks that, and I'm sure others will before the end of the season. I think the biggest competition right now is Elly De La Cruz, and at this rate, he'll probably be in the majors and graduated by the time the year ends.
Yeah, I think Holiday is going to be the consensus number one. Baseball America did have a good little roundtable article there discussing the pretty much 3 options: Elly De La Cruz, Jackson Chourio, and Jackson Holiday. And that was a fun read. And I'm like, there's no way. And then I think after that article was published, Elly De La Cruz hit like 2 500-foot bombs. It's like, all right, yeah, he's pretty good too. But Holiday, I mean, he's 27 games into his high A career as a 19-year-old, and his walk rate is 18.5%. Strikeout rate is under 20%, and is a 200 WRC plus. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Jackson Holiday either, except a couple more weeks, he's going to be a 19-year-old AA.
I'm going to hop all the way down to the 10th spot. Cade Povich in our top 10 for the first time. And while there has been a little bit of unevenness to Povich's season, if you go game by game, where he seems to have a dominant start backed up by kind of the meh start, and then he'll go out and be lights out the next time around, the overall results are really strong. He has struck out 61 batters in 40 innings pitched at AA Bowie while walking 17. And to put this into context, last year when Povich got to Bowie, he had 23 1/3 innings to wrap things up and struck out 26 batters in that span, but walked 11. So the strikeouts are up from where they were last year, and the walks are down. We talked last month about how it didn't really seem like a stretch to make the argument that Cade Povich might be a better prospect than DL Hall. Now both are inside the top 10. Povich is only 3 spots behind Hall. How does that speak to how far he's progressed this season?
Tremendously. He's striking out almost 14 guys per 9 innings right now, and that's across 40 innings of work. You mentioned the walk rate is down. I mean, he was walking over 4.24 guys per 9 last year in Bowie across 23 innings. It's down to 3.83. So, yeah, the walks are still high. It's still like a 10% walk rate, which you want to see down a little bit. But he's pitching in Bowie, and he's just not giving up home runs. How many has he given up for the year? 2. 2 home runs in 40 innings he's given up while pitching a lot of his games in Bowie, which is a predominantly hitter's park. We see a lot of cheapies fly out of that ballpark. And yeah, the ERA is 4.5, but the FIP and XFIP are down around 2. So I think he's just extremely unlucky this year and pitching extremely well. I mean, it's up and down, but like I mentioned, he's working on some things. They were specifically mentioning about how he was trying to figure out the exact pitch mix that was going to work best for him to get him to the major leagues. And so I think he's still tinkering with that, but in the meantime, still having a lot of really big success for the Bay Sox.
Yeah, it's a good point. And another thing is this past start on Sunday, which I think he ended up on the hook for 5 or 6 runs over 4 1/3 innings. He was scoreless through 3, gave it 1 run through 4, and then I think Tyler Verge let in a couple inherited runners score on him as well in the 5th. So outside of just some bad luck as far as batting average for balls in play and who knows defensively what's going on, but like we've said a million times, the minor leagues is not about results. As far as the stat line, it's like these guys are more worried about setting themselves up for success in the future once they get to the main stage rather than, having the lowest ERA they possibly can right now. And if you just watch him pitch, you can see why we have him in the top 10 now rather than but he's got a 4.50 ERA in AA. Yeah, watch him pitch and you'll get it. So love it. Cave Povich. DL Hall, he's a tricky one, right? But hopefully he gets like a 10-day stint in the majors soon because he only has 8 days of active service on a major league roster before he's no longer prospect eligible. No slight to Hall. Still like him, but prospect fatigue. Let's get him off this list.
Yeah, I was going to drop him a little bit further. I think he only dropped like a spot or 2 for me, but I did bump Heston Kjerstad up above Beavers and Hall. Kjerstad's performance in AA this year is just too much, and DL Hall, even if he is just strictly a bullpen arm, which, like I've said before, it's a disappointment, but it's not a failure. Kjerstad is potentially your everyday future starting right fielder in the major leagues, or even first baseman for the Orioles. So I had to move Kjerstad up there above Hall at this point.
Yeah, I dropped Hall to 7th and moved Westberg and Kjerstad ahead of him as well.
Yeah, I'm actually the only one of the 3 of us that has Beavers ahead of Kjerstad at this point. I still stand by the point I've been making all along, which is that I think Beavers is a higher floor guy who could potentially be the better all-around player. The defense is better, and I think that with the right adjustments, he'll have the better hit tool. Kjerstad, however, I think is always going to have more power, and you can make the argument that because Kjerstad has that card-carrying power, he's maybe a safer bet to reach the major leagues, and he's certainly closer to the major leagues right now. So really, I think for me, he's proven he can hit AA pitching. I want to see what he does at AAA against tougher breaking balls, how he does, chasing pitches. How is he going to, handle the curveball that is close but not into the strike zone? And how is he going to do against the better off-speed stuff he's going to see against more experienced pitchers? But you can make a really strong argument for putting Kjerstad ahead of Beavers right now, and I completely buy that, even though for me personally, Beavers is still ahead of him.
Yeah, and I get that too. I mean, Beavers has a ton of upside. To me, he's just more of a project, which, it's just going to take longer to get there. And that's one of those things when we're talking about guys, honestly, the difference between Kjerstad and Beavers is not, I have Kjerstad at 6, Beavers at 12. It's not as big as that seems. It's just preferences, who's closer, and all the million of factors that go into this. But yeah, Beavers still a great prospect despite some recent struggles. But we knew that he was more of a project than a get up to the AAA as quick as possible, kind of like Cowser and Norby and all those guys were.
Yeah, Beavers is the numbers don't look great for him this year, but I think if you watch him play, he's been pretty consistent. He gets these stretches where he's consistent at the plate, and like John Muley's doing that series, I think, where he's going to follow him throughout the year and highlight the tinkering that they're doing. He's definitely a bigger project, which is why I do agree that I think his ceiling is higher than Westberg's, or Kjerstad's. Looking at Westberg's name here, his ceiling is definitely higher than Kjerstad's, but it's just going to take a little bit longer. And that's why, honestly, I think like you said, Kjerstad's proven he can hit AA pitching. He's not striking out against AA guys. I I'm fully expecting him to get the call up to AAA as soon as there's room. I would like to see him moved up to AAA. And honestly, a guy who's right outside our top 10 there, I could see Judd Fabian get the bump up to AA pretty soon as well. I think he could. I think he could fit in pretty well at Prince George's Stadium in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think Fabian might be the first guy up to AA. Maybe Fabian and Holiday together when Prieto and Kershaw go up.
Fabian hit 5 doubles last week, and Bob, you had a great point on Twitter last week, which is that he did not have a double. What was it, through his first 30 games of the season, and he now has 7? To me, that's a telltale sign of a guy developing power at Aberdeen, which we know is not a home run hitter's park, and just finding the gap. So he could be one of those guys that gets the call up to Bowie sometime in the coming weeks or months, and you see those home run numbers take a big spike.
Yeah, it was weird. He had like 5 home runs and no doubles for the longest time, and then boom, double. Yeah, and you're starting to see all like Mason McRae and these guys that follow these prospects really start to get on Judd Fabian. Like right now, I've seen a lot of like prospect tilt and Mason McRae, like I mentioned, just talking Fabian up big time. Yeah, I think the breakout season is here. I also heard that, I can't remember where I heard this from, but the way that the Orioles are developing their hitters just matches up perfectly with the way Fabian needs to be developed, and that wasn't happening before he was drafted into the Major League club. So they expected some big gains, and here they are. They're coming. I mean, once he gets out of Aberdeen, it's like you said, it's going to be like Norby last year, where I think the offense is going to look a lot better for a lot of these guys that are currently at Aberdeen once they do get to Bowie.
And with that, let's go into the 11 through 20 section on this list. We've got Samuel Basayo holding firm at 11th, followed by Judd Fabian at 12th, Seth Johnson at 13th. Chase McDermott moves up a couple of spots to 14th. Drew Rom holding steady at 15, followed by Hudson Haskin. Cesar Prieto takes a nice jump into the teens, landing at 17. John Rhodes 18th, Frederick Bencosme at 19, and then Gene Pinto at 20. Please get that man to Bowie as soon as possible. I want to watch him throw against AA hitters. He has nothing left to prove against high A guys, and the same thing for Justin Armbruster, who is further down this list. Get him to AAA soon. But I'm going to start with McDermott. It's kind of been an interesting month for him. It seems like the command has been more of an issue, but he still had some pretty solid starts, including starting out that combined no-hitter against Altoona a couple of weeks ago, and he moves up on our list a few places here. Where do you think he is in his development? I'll start with Nick on that.
See, after these last 2 starts, I'm not 100% sure, but because he had the 5 no-hit innings, and then he comes out his next start against Akron and was up to 5 no-hit innings again before he kind of fell off there in the 6th inning, which is fine, but 10 walks in his last 2 starts and 14 walks in his last 3 combined outings, after we just kind of praised the guy for keeping the walks down actually at the beginning of the year. But it seems like there were some, I think I mentioned this last week when we talked about it, there were some quotes from the pitching coach in Bowie, Forrest Herman, about how they were pretty confident in McDermott's ability to pound the strike zone, and he was working better in the zone, and they were confident in the gains he was making. So, I mean, maybe, again, this is one of those examples of maybe he is hitting his spots when they need to, and overall the data is looking good. He's tough. I think Bob had a great point when we were talking about him last time. Could he be the new DL Hall in the system? And I think after these last couple outings, it could be true, because you don't throw 10 no-hit innings without good stuff. But the walks, man, they took quite a jump these last couple starts.
Yeah, the walks are starting to creep back up. But to me, it's like, and I don't know if this is fair of me, but I kind of use Drew Rom and Hudson Haskin right now as like gatekeepers into like I don't know, if you can hit a certain point of ceiling, I think then you're going to be hopping over them. If you're not, you're going to be right below them. That's kind of how I look at them, right in that 15, 16 range where they are. It's hard for me to justify Rom over McDermott at this point, just because McDermott's ceiling is pretty high. If he can ever get back to consistently, limiting the walks, he's a mid rotation starter, whereas Rom is like a back end starter bullpen guy, and McDermott's more of like a mid to back end starter, high leverage bullpen guy. So that's what made me jump him over, and yeah, that's why. I don't know. We'll get to Haskin and Prieto in a little bit, but something there too.
That's exactly what I do with the pitchers like Rom, and that's why like McDermott was right over them. Seth Johnson is up there, and his injury makes this whole thing weird. But yeah, that's exactly what I do as well. Even John Rhodes, I use as a big benchmark as well to kind of where do I place some certain guys. But yeah, not alone there.
Not alone.
That's a great point, Bob, because I feel like maybe subconsciously we've been doing that for 3 years now, going back to when Haskin was drafted, because I feel like those two players generally land around this spot on the list. And look across the board, we pretty much rank them the same.
Yeah.
We have them all three in that 14 to 16 range. So that's kind of the consensus that three of us have formed on those two guys. And I think this is actually a good segue to Prieto. We were down a little bit on Prieto coming into this year. And I know for myself, I just didn't like the look of his at-bats last year. I thought he was too aggressive, didn't hit the ball that hard, didn't have the arm for the left side of the infield. What seems to be the difference maker this year has nothing to do with a change in plate approach. The plate approach seems exactly the same. He's just hitting the ball a lot harder.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. His ISO, and for him, this is good. It's 140, which is, I think, right around average, like for the entire league. I think at least in the major leagues it is. But to me, it's the fact that, okay, he's never going to walk, but he is walking 6.3%, which is higher than at any point last year. He already didn't strike out. He struck out around 15% of the time, which is really good, even for a contact hitter. But he's striking out 5.7% of the time. Like, he's just literally not striking out. That's better than Adam Frazier. Like, he's Luis Ariz revived as a younger man, slightly younger man. To me, I was high on him. Obviously, last year he got off to that great start in Aberdeen. I think we were like, okay, this is who we got here. And then he just got worse and worse and worse. Well, it's been 2 full months now. He's batting .360 with a 900 OPS. And like I said, these percentages of 148 WRC plus, he's fully deserving to be in AAA right now. I was wrong about him. I definitely was down on him, especially after the Arizona Fall League. But, we kept, holding that little thing of like, he needs to get acclimated to the U.S. He needs to get adjusted to the grind of a full season. Those were obviously factors, but I just did not see him coming back out and performing this way for 2 straight months to start this season. And I'm glad he is.
Yeah, I'm going through my list. I think moving Kerstad up 2 or 3 spots to number 6 was a big jump for me. And then really the only other like notable movement I had, we'll talk about one guy who had tremendous movement from not even on my list to like top 20. But there was another guy here. Cesar Prieto is the only other guy here who I think had notable movement on my list. I moved him up 4 or 5 spots because same thing. I wasn't like, he's done. He's not a prospect anymore because I was going to give him the full benefit of the doubt for another year of that move, that transition, just culturally, the life changes he had to make. I couldn't even imagine like what this man was going through while also trying to compete at the AA level in pro ball. But I was not expecting this Cesar Prieto. Like, this is the Cesar Prieto that was one of the more prolific hitters, if not the most prolific hitter to come out of Cuba. And we're seeing that now at the AA level. And that's why I said the other week on a mailbag episode when whoever it was asked if we could like rank the infielders in terms of MLB readiness. Honestly, I put Cesar Prieto at number 2 because I think you could put him in the major leagues starting second baseman for a club, not the Orioles, but for another club right now, and he could be okay. He's not going to strike out a ton. Maybe the strikeout rate jumps back up to that 12, 13% mark or whatever, but he's not going to strike out a lot. He's going to collect base hits. He's going to play an okay second base. He kind of is who he is. And yeah, kudos to him. And I agree. It's well beyond time he's got over, I can't do math. He's up to like 550, 560 plate appearances at AA. Like, yeah, AAA time for him for sure.
Yeah, he would put the bat on the ball, and he's actually decent at second and third base. I mean, he's not a deficit out there by any means. So
We'll go down to the next part of the list here. Checking in at 21 is Max Wagner, who has had a very hot month of May down at Aberdeen. Luis Almeida, the young shortstop, right behind him at 22nd, followed by Braylon Tavera, who took a pretty big jump up Nick's list and lands on 23rd. Noah Denoyer, 24th. Justin Armbruster, who I just talked about a moment ago, get him to AAA. He's at 25th on our list. Reed Trimble, who's currently on the IL, moves down a couple of spots to 26th, while Leandro Arias and Carter Baumler hold steady at 27th and 28th, followed by Ryan Watson. And then Creed Willems bursts into the top 30, moving up 5 spots from last month. I'm going to start with Max Wagner here. Last month, we kind of talked about how we didn't really know what the Orioles had in Wagner yet. He got off to a really slow start, and then he has been one of the Orioles' best hitters in the farm system over the month of May, and a big part of the reason why Aberdeen has gone to probably being outside of Norfolk, maybe the most interesting team in the Orioles farm system right now. Nick, do you feel like we're any closer to having an answer of what we have with Max Wagner?
I mean, he hits the ball incredibly hard. These home runs he's collecting are going like over the building over there in left field in Aberdeen. He's walking at above a 60% walk rate right now, which is absurd. He's not striking out a ton. I don't know what the strikeout rate was. I have to like compare and contrast like month 1 to month 2 what the strikeout rate has done, but I feel like it's dropped pretty noticeably. He's only hitting 221 on the year, but that tells you absolutely nothing about the season he's having. Extra base hits, he's stolen 12 bases as well. He's getting on base. I mean, he's kind of doing it all. And I think shout out to I forget his name every single episode over at ESPN. Kylie McDaniel. Kylie McDaniel, like shout out to him. He's on the Max Wagner train like he's on the Cade Povich train earlier than anybody else. I think he's the first to jump on the Max Wagner train from a national perspective. He said he got the bump to future value grades since the season has started. So clearly someone is taking notice. And if Kylie's going to say that, I imagine the underlying data for Max Wagner looks phenomenal. And that's why he's bumping him up so high on his list. So I'm paying attention a lot more now than I was a month ago. That's for sure.
yeah, I was actually going to say, just like I talked about Judd Fabian popping up on all these analytical numbers guys that are just, looking at who's hitting the ball hard and all this stuff, who have access to this that we can't get for some freaking reason. Max Wagner, same thing. You're starting to see him pop up on these charts where it's like, who has the best launch angle plus exit velocity, and his name's popping up. And like you said, the Kylie McDaniel thing. And I looked it up. 27, a little bit over 27% strikeout rate in April. It's 23% in May. So that's an improvement. I mean, it's not going to be a drastic improvement when it comes to strikeout rate that in that short amount of time, but that is a definite improvement there. And walking 21% of the time in May, pretty crazy. I think we were kind of, at least for me, I'm like, man, Nick has Max Wagner all the way up that high last month. And I'm like, I don't know. Look how he started the season. And now it's like, oh shoot, I got to correct. I got to go up there. I feel like he's a guy that's going to keep climbing as long as he continues to perform as he has so far. So Nick was on top of that one. I was on top of Creed Willems. I had him in my top 30 last month, and now you guys are starting to see the truth in things.
The Max Wagner thing for me was just like, I had so many questions about who is he, what kind of player he is, but I was just going off draft capital. I'm like, I'm trusting the Orioles here on this one and saying, if they're going to use a second round pick on a guy, a cold weather high school prospect who didn't play that much in college, I'm buying it. So yeah, he's proven a lot of people right so far.
Go to Creed Willems here because Willems actually missed a little bit of time in May with an IL stint, but he came back last week and showed no signs of rust, going 4 for 16 over 5 games against Lynchburg with a home run and 6 RBIs. We've talked a lot on our show about the gains he has made as a hitter this year at Del Mar, but he's now batting .302 with an OPS of 1056 through his first 120 plate appearances. Depth at this point is probably the reason he's not in Aberdeen. You want to get him consistent innings behind the plate, which you can do more easily at Delmarva than you can do at Aberdeen because you've got Silas Ardoin and Adam Retzbach up there, two very capable catchers themselves. But I'll just throw this out there, and either one of you can jump in. When do you think we hit that breaking point where you just can't leave Willems and Delmarva anymore? Or is it possible that he's there most, if not all, of this year?
I don't think it's going to be that long, but I'm wondering, it's a midseason thing. Like the All-Star break, you kind of see a big shift sometimes after that little break in action. I could see that. I could see maybe Silas Ardoin is looking like he's capable of going up to Double-A Bowie, and that opens up one catcher spot. And maybe it's even Basayo and Willems at that time that would go up. But I think you're looking at early July. That would be my guess. Just let him keep going out there and getting playing time, putting the numbers. He's not going to be over 1,000 OPS all year long, so that's ridiculous to hold out hope for. But like you said, he did not, come crashing down to earth coming off the IL. He's still batted 250 with some extra base hits, some walks. So just let him keep going out there. I don't think it's a rush, but I don't think it's like a full season in Delmarva type of thing.
No, he's one of these guys. Usually I'm super patient. Everybody's like, move him up, move him up, move him up. He has one good game, move him up. I'm like, I'm fine with this guy like sitting here all year. But with Creed, I'm just like, get him up to high A. It, honestly, yeah, even if Ardoin if you're listening to the High A broadcast, we need to figure out how you pronounce his last name. Even if Ardoin and Retzbach are still there, like I mentioned before, Retzbach can play the outfield. He can play first base. Like you can move him around. And Retzbach, he's got some pretty swings, but he's also like, it's Creed Willems. I think Creed Willems will take precedence over Adam Retzbach. Defensively, I mean, he's got not even the bat. The gains with the bat are for real. The guy hit like 190 last year. He's one of the top offensive performers in this entire system this year. The power is legit. The strikeouts are down a tick. They're always going to be high. He's a catcher. He's a hard contact guy. The strikeouts are always going to be high. I'm not concerned about that. The walk rate has improved tremendously. But even defensively, I mean, he's thrown out 35% of base runners this year. It was only 22% last year in Delmarva. I mean, he's getting better behind the plate. He's up to, I just noticed this the other day that their MILB.com player profiles have some advanced numbers as well. If you scroll down a little bit, I've never seen those before, but I mean, even like pitches per plate appearance, he was like 3.5 last year. He's seeing 4 pitches per plate appearance this year. That's up. I mean, it's everything across the board for Creed Willems is noticeably better. Physically, he looks noticeably better. It's all there. I know a lot of people ask, is this legit? How real is this Creed Willems breakout? I think, like Bob said, the absurd OPS number is going to come down, but I think overall, this breakout is very for real. And he's going to get up to high A, and I don't think he's going to miss too much of a beat, to be completely honest.
Well, you explained that pretty well. Can you explain Braylon Tavera for us now?
I apparently forgot Braylon Tavera was in the system when we did our update last month, and I did not include him on our list at all. So that is why Braylon Tavera takes such a big jump this month on our top 50 list.
This is a good time to note. Oh, got it, Bob.
I was just going to say, at least it wasn't like in a preseason or midseason big update.
Yeah.
This is a good time to note before we move on to the 30s that short season ball does start next week. And you've got 3 players right here that we're expecting to see, take the field next week, likely with Elise Almeida down in the Dominican Summer League, Braylon Tavera, and Leandro Arias up at the FCL. Almeida, based on what we have heard, seems like a guy who could move quickly because although he was signed out of the Dominican Republic, he was born in the U.S. and was playing here up until a couple of years ago. So there's a sense that he could be a little bit ahead of some international prospects at the same age, but we'll see exactly how that plays out. Just in general thoughts, what would you look for from these guys this season?
Tavera, I'm expecting, and Arias, honestly, I'm just expecting them to perform well enough at FCL that they get a taste of low A Delmarva before the end of the season, or maybe after the FCL, and if Delmarva's still playing. I think those guys should have developed enough to at least be able to get a taste, kind of like Steven Acevedo, and I I feel like some other guys got a little bit of a taste of Delmarva towards the end of last year. Almeida, I'm not sure what to make of him. I would just like to note that he dropped 3 spots. That's for me. That was because Pinto, Prieto, and just a couple guys who have actually been playing and been able to, set themselves apart, jumped over him. It's not like he did anything, obviously. He's 16 years old, hasn't even played a professional game yet. But yeah, I'd like to see him get to the FCL. I know that's not that common because it's a short season, and obviously that's a lot of travel to go from DSL to the States. But especially since he was, he grew up in the States, I could see it happening. So maybe he gets half the season in DSL and then second half in the FCL.
Yeah, Tavera, I'm just interested to see who he is. I mean, he's like the international Max Wagner for me, just because, I mean, you look at some national lists, it's like some people he's a top 30 prospect. He's a top, 20, 25 prospect even. And then places like Fangraphs, I think have never been high on Tavera. He's always been out of their like top 30, top 40, however many Eric Longenhagen puts up. So he's a tough one. It's like, who exactly is Tavera? I know the Orioles say he's a potential 5-tool guy. He's athletic center fielder. I'm curious to see there. Arias, I know the reverse. Fangraphs has been very high on Arias, talking about the high exit velos, a guy who's going to stick at shortstop and potentially, if the power comes around, be a weapon in this system, a power hitting shortstop who gets on base, who steals bases. I'm really excited to watch Leandro Arias, honestly, more than Braylon Tavera. He's probably the number one from that draft class guy that I'm anxious to watch. And Almeida, I know there's a lot of speculation when he first signed, like, oh, he could begin the season in FCL, but then, like you mentioned, he is 16 years old. Like, he should be a junior in high school right now. So it's okay if they send him for a couple of weeks at least. He can end the year in the FCL, but get him comfortable, get him acclimated down in Dominican right now. I'd like to see him show up to do an interview first and foremost, but on the field, let's see what that bat's got for the 16-year-old kid. Like he said, he's played highly competitive baseball across the U.S. for all those years. And he's someone who I've never seen specific schools, but you always see stuff mentioned like he probably could have played at any college program he wanted to if he would have stayed in the States and was getting those offers already as like a 13, 14-year-old. So that gets me excited for what kind of player Almeida can be.
And we'll have a chance to see that beginning next week. And we'll go now to 31 through 40 on the list. Starting off, we have got Davy Cruz checking in at number 31, followed by Carlos Tavera, 32nd. Chris Valamont, who has been pitching very well down at Norfolk, moves up 5 spots to 33. Kyle Bronovich, who we're still waiting to come back from Tommy John surgery, holds steady at 34th. Trace Bright, who after an electric April really slowed down in the month of May, moves down, but not a whole lot, at 35. Anderson De Los Santos moves up a spot to 36. He seems to be getting the bat going at Delmarva. Zach Peak, who just like Kyle Bronovich, recovering from Tommy John surgery, has not pitched this year. Probably isn't going to pitch this year at 37th. Juan Nunez, probably Delmarva's, if not their most reliable pitcher, one of their most reliable pitchers, moves up 5 spots to 38th. Michael Hernandez, 39th. And then Carter Young at 40th. So kind of an interesting range of guys here, but I'm going to focus on Valamont for a minute because we talked on tonight's show about pitching depth at AAA and how the Orioles probably are going to have to go out and get help at the deadline this year for pitching, and that we hope Grayson Rodriguez is able to get back to the major leagues sometime in the next few weeks or months and stay for good once he's back. Does Valamont, in your mind, either of your minds, factor into the plans for the major league team this year?
It's tough, right? Because he's pitching really well, and I think it's the changeup, right? That's like been the weapon. I don't know if he's in the plans, but I think he's definitely an option if they need someone eventually, especially like a multi-inning reliever type who I feel like we've said that phrase a lot when it comes to these minor leaguers that they're developing. But I think it's really tricky for me. Like he's been so good, but they DFA'd him off of the 40-man roster. So you'd have to add him back on. There are other options available as well that I think you might go to first if you needed someone. But I'd like to see him stay in the organization all season and maybe fight for a spot next spring training. I think that's where I'm at with him.
Yeah, I know. Especially early on in the year, it was like change up heavy is all he was throwing. I haven't looked his last couple starts to be honest, and see how those results have stuck. And it's Cam Lanzilli. I think he was with the Orioles at some point last year, and now he is the director of pitching at some pitching lab. I can't remember the one off the top of my head, but I know he's done a lot with Chris Valamont and kind of using our videos, and it's showing like this offseason, Valamont's thing was finding pitches that worked better against right-handed hitters because right-handed hitters gave him troubles in years past. And I know at the beginning of the year, I mean, righties just weren't hitting him at all. So I don't know if those splits are still the same. I don't have his numbers pulled up here, but like I kind of like what this guy does in shorter stints. I don't think he's a starter, but I think as that kind of relief option, maybe a longer man at the bullpen, I think he could possibly be effective. I've seen some notes that some people kind of down on him with the fastball, thinking the fastball is not going to be strong enough to play in the major leagues. But he's, if anything, he's progressed this year. He's pitching better this year than he did last year in AAA. So, I'm still kind of iffy on him too, but he's showing progress at least.
Yeah, I've got the numbers up here for Valamon, and left-handers, are performing worse against him than right-handers, but the opponent's average right now is 172 against lefties versus 236 against righties. So the numbers are certainly neutralized, pretty significantly from where they were last year, where he was a lot better against left-handers. I also give him and the Orioles a ton of credit because if you look at how bad he was with walking base runners when he was in the Twins system, he has managed to keep that down with the Orioles. I kind of agree with both of you that maybe this is not a starter and more of a reliever or more of an up and down guy, but kind of hope he sticks around for a while. I want to see what they have there. And I'm going to go to Juan Nunez. As I mentioned, Nunez has maybe been Delmarva's most reliable pitcher. 46 strikeouts against 21 walks in 38 innings pitched, 3.55 ERA. Those walk totals are a little high, but I pointed something out in one of our dailies last week, which is that when Nunez got to Delmarva at the end of last year, it was a very small sample size, only 14 2/3 innings. But he did not miss bats in that whole stretch. He only struck out 7 batters. Now the strikeouts have taken a significant step forward. The walks are kind of holding steady. He's 22, but still doesn't have a lot of experience. This is his first full year in pro ball. What have your thoughts been on his development? And I'll start with Bob.
I like that it seems like he gets better every time out. I mean, maybe not linearly, but it just seems, the lower walks, more strikeouts, just getting deeper into games now. I just like the way he's progressing, and I think you're seeing that arm that was so highly touted by Fangraphs and some other places. And yeah, I'm starting to buy in. I was obviously Juan Rojas over Juan Nunez before this season, but with Rojas on the 60-man IL, and we don't even know why, and Nunez coming out and performing like this, and I would expect him to, for his age, I know he hasn't been pitching very long, but for his age, 22 years old, I think he'll get to high A Aberdeen this year. So that'll be a nice test where it's more like, especially after the draft, like that'll be a big bump up for him from Delmarva. If he can keep it going, then he can keep climbing up this list all year long.
Yeah, he's pretty he's gone 5 innings 3 times. And I think walks in the starts he goes 4 innings, he's walking 2 or 3 guys in each of those starts. So the pitch counts are getting away from him early on. But I mean, you look at the game log here, he's got 1 bad start. Throw away the first start of the year. I'm throwing away the first start of the year for like everybody. It's an extended spring training start. You throw that away. Nunez has 1 bad start, 4 innings, and it was the start before last on May 19th. 4 innings, 5 runs, 7 hits. But he struck out 8 guys and walked just 2. So like, I'll take that. Then comes out in his last start 7 days later, and strikes out 8 guys again in 4 1/3 innings. So the strikeouts are definitely climbing. The walks, he's got a blip there with the walks. He's got a blip there with the earned runs. I think overall his numbers don't tell. The 3.55 ERA doesn't even tell you the full story. He is Delmarva's most reliable pitcher, most advanced pitcher. And I think you can move him up to high Aberdeen here in a couple of weeks, and he could be a really interesting prospect. A guy that starts to make a lot more noise. I mean, you got Nunez, Rojas, Valamont, Yennier Cano up in the major leagues, Cade Povich down there. I mean, how many Twins pitchers do we have in the system?
Tyler Wells.
Tyler Wells, I forgot about him. I mean, and they're all performing really, really well or intriguing in some way. So, yeah, I'm keeping a close eye on all of these guys, but Nunez especially.
Who said there were only 4 full season minor league teams? We also have a 5th over in the Minnesota area. But yeah, I think never mind. I forgot what I was going to say. I had something, but must not have been important.
We'll go down now to the last part of our list, and this is where things get interesting. This might be where you want to keep some tabs on some guys because we have some new additions to the list down in this section. Maverick Hanley, kind of a mainstay in the 40s. They're at 41. Dante Williams, 42nd. The bat has not been there this year, but he has made some real highlight plays in Bowie's outfield. Aaron Estrada, 43rd. Looking forward to seeing him in the FCL next week, hopefully. Juan De Los Santos, 44th. Followed by Elio Prado, who joins the list at 45th. He's getting off to a solid start at Delmarva. Silas Arduan, 46th. Juan Rojas, 47th. Edwin Amparo, 48th. That's another guy we could be seeing in the FCL next week. And welcome to the list, number 49 and number 50, Ryan Long and Alex Pham. I'm going to start with Pham here because, as you can see on the screen if you're watching this, Douglas Hodo III got top 50 votes from all 3 of us. Yet Bob had Alex Pham high enough on his list that Pham actually manages to overtake Hodo and a few other prospects to crack the top 50. And a lot of that has to do with the success that Pham has had this season. And he's coming off a very hot May in which he struck out 29 batters in 18 to third innings pitched while walking 10 and posting a 1.96 ERA. So, Bob, just kind of give us your thoughts here on Pham.
Actually, it's Ryan Long and Pham. I think that I jumped straight onto the list. The power. No. Yeah, I just like what these guys have been doing, not just like because they have low ERAs, but just especially Ryan Long. I saw him on a graph again talking about these like stat-oriented guys. I love when the season really gets going and these guys come out with these things. Swinging strike percentage and I forget what else, but Ryan Long has been really effective, and it seems sustainable. Alex Pham, it's kind of along the same lines where it's working, and they're right at that line. High A, could be in Double A before the end of the season. And again, the Orioles are just building a farm completely full of guys that could be back end to multi-inning relievers. And, if you can be that, you can probably ramp up and be a single inning reliever at higher leverage. So just love the way the Orioles are developing pitching. And these 2 guys are like this year's pop-ups early in the season, where last year it was Armbruster and Van Loon, and the list goes on and on. But yeah, I feel bad for Douglas Hodo because he did make all 3 of our lists, but he'll make this list at some point soon this season. And real quickly, I forgot what I was going to say before, and I remembered. Gene Pinto up to Bowie, Juan Nunez up to Aberdeen, and before, when we were talking about gatekeepers, another one that I have that's like firm is Kyle Bernovich, Zach Peak. They're like grouped together for me at all times, right around 35, 36. And they're definitely a clear like delineation between above them and below them for me right now as they recover from injuries.
Yeah, Ryan Long's just riding the high of striking out Mike Trout in the World Baseball Classic, and he has not slowed down since. I do like him as well. He's a bigger, powerful guy that I think literally no one is going to talk about or give credit to, but he's a big, powerful guy. I didn't want to say like Mike Bauman, like physically, I almost feel like he's Mike Bauman vibes. He could be. And I don't think he has that fastball velo or anything, but he's just got such a deep repertoire of pitches under his belt. It's interesting to see the success he's having. And Pham, I mean, the strikeouts have always been there. He's struck out almost 12 guys per nine in Delmarva last year. Gets the bump up to high A and limited innings last year because I think he had an injury or two last year, but was striking out more than about 13 guys per nine in Aberdeen last year. This year in 31 innings, he's striking out 13 guys per nine. Not giving up a lot of home runs, good ERA, good average against. The only issue really with Pham is the walks. And so like that's why with a lot of these guys, I definitely see kind of bullpen arms or short inning guys. But like Bob said, you're building this entire stable of these guys, providing that good depth as hopefully they move up to the organization and more of these guys stick. It's good depth to have. So yeah, it's shout out to Alex Pham. I was not expecting him to have this good of a season this year, even though I've always been a fan of his.
And as you see here, the rest of the list, 51 through 56, these are guys who got votes on our individual top 50s and fell just short. Michel Deson, 51st. Eason Lucas, 52nd. Douglas Hodo at 53, followed by Moises Chase, 54th. Colin Burns, 55th. And Isaac De Leon, 56th. That does it for our top 50 for the month of June. But before we wrap up, Bob, Nick, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just like to give Elio Prado a couple more words since he's new to the list at 45. He's just been so steady. He's got a 273 batting average, 785 OPS, which is actually good for a 126 WRC plus, 11.7% walk rate, and only striking out 13.5% of the time. ISO is right around average. He's got some speed, plays some defense. Just really solid overall player so far this season.
And this is a fun top 50. And even looking at those extra guys who didn't make the list, Easton Lucas could be a guy, a major league arm. There's even some other pitchers I think that didn't even crack that extra list that I think could eventually be like considered guys who are like, yeah, you could see them making a major league bullpen somewhere. Nolan Hoffman, for example, and some other guys, especially in Bowie and Aberdeen right now, but Keegan Gillis, who should be a lot higher than he is. But I even think with the FCL and DSL seasons starting in the next couple of days, I guarantee you there are 2 or 3 guys among those two rosters that we don't know like anything about right now. And they're going to break out this year. And we're going to eventually learn that, oh yeah, they definitely should have been on our radar. So just, again, something else that speaks to the incredible depth in this system. And you've got this whole international side of the game that we're still like, we just don't know much about. And it's so hard to get information from those leagues, especially the DSL. There are guys in these last 2 classes. Edwin Amparo could be one of those guys. I feel like he's a potential sleeper guy. We're going to learn a lot more about these guys over the next couple of weeks. And that has me even more excited for a future list. And the draft is coming up in a month as well. So yeah, this list is going to look a lot different too. And by the next update, 2 updates from now.
Yeah, never slows down, does it? Love it.
Definitely does it. And we will be back next week on the regular show. We'll actually talk about the FCL and DSL seasons. They will have played their first games by the time we record next week's episode, but we'll be able to talk about the rosters and get into some of the breakout candidates you could see there. And it's worth noting that the July list will be the last one before the draft, which is scheduled, I believe, for July 9th. So we're going to have our updated top 50 in July. And then in August, when we're also going to post the main list over to BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com, you're going to see some really extensive changes. In the meantime, thank you for listening to this top 50 countdown. Bob, Nick, and I will be on here throughout the week with our daily recaps, of course, and then we'll be back to our main show next week. If you listened to both episodes tonight, thanks for sticking with us throughout both. And if you came to this later on, thanks for revisiting. For Bob and Nick, this is Zach. You've been listening to this on The Verge, patron exclusive.